my name is Piana, I'm a book-obsessed metalhead, and welcome to my channel. And today it's time for episode 3, I think, of Metalhead's book club. So I found out that the vocalist and lyricist of one of my favourite bands, I'm talking top 5 favourite bands, has written a novel, Snowburial, by Michael J.J. KÖGLER. So JJ is the vocalist and lyricist to the band Harakiri for the Sky, which is an Austrian post-black metal band, and as I said, it's one of my favourite bands in the world. I was going to put it in the Margot Robbie, more advanced metal bands category, but I have seen in the comment section of their songs and their concert that people are saying that this was like a gateway metal band for them. So apparently people who are uninitiated to metal can listen to this band and it's okay. Give it a spin, even if you've never listened to metal before. They put up their full set from Heavy Metal Festival Hellfest this year on their YouTube channel, and I will link that in the description. It's very good. It's well worth a watch. JJ also has his own personal band, Karg, which is very similar to Harakiri for the Sky in a musical sense. The lyrics are in German though, and as I've said before, my German isn't that brilliant, so I can't speak as much for the lyrics of Karg as with Harakiri for the Sky. But I do very much recommend the song EBBE FLUT. I'm sorry if I'm not saying that right, but it seems to tell a similar relationship to the one in Snowburial, so go check that out. All of this will be linked in the description, so yeah, go check it out. He is very, very good at writing mental health issues. Some of the themes to this band include depression, suicide, and coping with somebody else committing suicide. And he writes about it so beautifully in a way that is understandable and relatable. So I had high hopes for this book. I do, however, want to give a disclaimer. This book is centered around mental illness, drug addiction, suicidal depression, and suicide. So keep that in mind. So before I go into this book, I want to give a big thank you to the editor, Outbird, for releasing a copy of this in English. As I said, this is an Austrian writer, and I looked on their website. This is the only book that they have in English that they translated. So very thank you for that. I very much appreciate it. So when I started reading this book, I was blown away by how on point the writing is, and I actually started like highlighting a bunch of stuff. And then I realised that I had to calm down because otherwise I'd be basically highlighting this entire novel. It's exactly the type of book that I expected JJ to write. It's brilliant. So what I want to do in this video is mostly go over some of the issues that are addressed in this book, I'm going to try not to go off on too many tangents and too many personal stories because I related to this a lot. And as somebody who has suffered from mental health issues in the past, including suicidal depression, and who still suffers from some, probably that will last forever, I have quite a lot to say about this book. So this book tells the story of Tal Linden, a Austrian black metal musician and songwriter who is diagnosed with bipolar disorder. He seems to be a highly sensitive person, and he also suffers from drug addiction. This book is an account of his life with specific emphasis on the last couple of months or so that led to him ending his own life. So in general, this book tackles the topic of mental illness in a really good way. I really like the emphasis on how, despite the negative aspect of it, because a lot of the time having a mental illness is a pretty negative thing. It has very negative consequences on a person's life, but how it's portrayed as something that Tal manages to turn into something positive. He has this very poetic, whimsical outlook on life, which this is never kind of addressed, but you kind of get a feeling that he just accepts that this is the way he is, and he's going along with it, and kind of following the whimsical nature of his disorder wherever it takes him. So he has periodic obsessions with bands, with places. He likes to romanticize them and romanticize relationships for better or for worse. And he's also a writer and a musician. So he creates art that can inspire people and bring people joy from this very dark and negative facet of himself. And this is actually very much one of the appeals of the metal community and the goth community and like certain underground community, to not shy away from dark subjects like this that the general world likes to ignore most of the time, as if ignoring them is going to make them go away. It's not. It's way better and healthier to talk about them, to educate the world about them, to have conversations rather than trying to sweep it under the rug, ignore it and pretend it's not real. Even though this is something that affects people's lives, a lot of people's lives. It's not just like a couple of random people out of thousands. Literally anyone can have a mental health illness at some point in their lives. Nobody is safe from this. But until society as a whole is ready to tackle these issues, I guess we'll just keep talking about them in the metal community and wait for everyone to catch up. You're welcome to join us if you wish. The second point I want to talk about is that there is a rather specific emphasis on Tal's relationships in this book and how he feels about other people. The book says that he will just nurture relationships and try and get them to work out, even if they're negative, even if they're toxic. Because when you have a mental illness, finding people who are willing to accept that and accept you for the way you are and go along with it is actually quite complicated. There is also this narrative that's knocking around right now that I hear quite often about, oh, well, if you want to enter into a relationship, like find a life partner, then you need to sort out all your issues and figure out your issues first. The thing is, obviously, if you have issues that when you risk like hurting another person or damaging another human being, then obviously those issues need to be sorted out first. But in the case of mental illnesses that might affect a person's behavior or just their general way of being, their life as a whole, they can't always be addressed and solved. And this is also very true for me, is being in a relationship with somebody is actually a really good way of kind of keeping your mind occupied with something else. It really does serve as a distraction. Again, for better or for worse, being with somebody, having somebody to spend time with, to do things with, to keep you occupied, and to kind of keep your mind occupied and keep the mental illness at bay. But obviously that shouldn't be the only thing that is there to kind of counter the mental illness. Like, there needs to be therapy work done, and professionals keeping an eye on things. Otherwise, the danger is that the significant other basically ends up being a life raft. And the thing about relationships is they can end. The distraction, the work with mental health into the significant other, if that significant other leaves, then all of that work falls apart, and that's what ends up happening with Tal. I want to talk about the drug abuse, because this book also does a really good job, and I was really impressed because I don't think I've ever seen this in another novel that I can think of that handles drug addiction, is that we're shown one aspect of it. So we have the aspect that Tal leads Tal to be addicted to drug, which is that unfortunately drug abuse tends to go in tandem with mental illness, meaning that it's a way, again, of keeping the mental illness at bay, just keeping the brain occupied with something else, with taking mind off it, escaping to another place, whatever it is, whatever the effect is, it's a way of just escaping from the mental health issue. And this is why, unfortunately, so many addicts are people with ongoing mental health issues that use drugs as a way of just escaping from it. This is also true for alcohol, when the term drowning your sorrows, that's literally what it is. It's a coping mechanism, albeit a very destructive one. But what needs to be understood is that the mental illness is very destructive to begin with. So there is this part of the brain that's just doing its own thing, and we have no control over it. If you have been to therapy, or if you had sought out, obviously, treatment, there are a bunch of exercises that you can do. Like, they will teach you breathing exercises, grounding exercises, mind control, like emotional control, thought focus, all kinds of stuff. But the thing is, all of that takes time, and having a mental breakdown, having an episode of whatever, it is extremely exhausting. It's extremely taxing on the brain. And for me personally, like, when I was at home, okay, I can just go and put myself in my bed and do the breathing and do the mind focus and blah, and do stuff to take my mind off it. But if I was out in the street, or if I was at work, this stuff takes time. I need a place to do it where I'm safe. There wasn't that, unfortunately. I also suffered from agoraphobia, so it made it doubly complicated in situations like that. So I would just go and reach for the Xanax. Like, I've never done hard drugs because I honestly, like, having a mental illness is terrifying enough as it is, and I found, like, taking hard drugs even more terrifying. So that's not something that I ever found any relief with. But I did used to take Xanax, and even still to this day, when I have a moment, I'm like, where's the Xanax? Because it really does help. But Xanax just whacks you out of your brain, and I got fired from a job because of this. Having a mental illness is complicated enough as it is. It's not something that is very well received, especially when you're trying to get a job and you're trying to explain to somebody who probably doesn't understand, because it is hard. I get that it's hard when you've never had a mental illness to understand what it's like. And so many times I've been told, oh, well, you're just too emotional, or you're just, just suck it up, or, well, everybody else can cope. Like, it's not as easy as that. So there's already that barrier of, like, if I explain this to this person, are they going to understand? And then obviously there's the drugs that I had to take, the Xanax. I had Prozac as well at some point, and I had something else, but I can't remember what it was. But it also had a really hard effect on me. And I did tell the doctors, please don't give me something, like, I need to be functional, I have a job, I need to be able to work and do my job properly. But unfortunately, my mental health issues were so severe that I couldn't have anything less strong. Like, these were the least strongest drugs that they could give me, where I could maybe still be functional, but I just became very, very slow. And as I said, I eventually got fired because my employers were like, we don't think you're motivated enough to do this job, even though I was. I love my job. I hated my boss, but I love my job. So it's having a mental health issue is a difficult thing to explain, but also getting treatment, getting medication for it that can also have some really severe side effects is also difficult to explain and difficult to understand. So there's really no way out of it. But there's another character in this book who is really into drugs, but not for mental health reasons. And I really appreciate that we get both sides of this in this book, that we get this character who is described as somebody who thinks that it's fun. He takes drugs because he thinks it's fun, and he likes seeing other people go down with him. So he wants to go down this road because he thinks it's fun, and he wants to drag others down with him. So this is one of the toxic relationships we talked about. But that's also a side of drug abuse that is quite common, that I've come across and I've heard other people talk about. And it is quite terrifying to be around these kinds of people who just don't really care about those around them, who just want to laugh at them fail. It is quite disturbing, but I did appreciate the multiple aspects, or at least the two, I think, main aspects of drug abuse. As I said, it's not okay to have a mental illness. It's also not okay to get treatment for a mental illness. If you start telling people that you spent time in a mental health hospital, oh my god, you get some strange looks. I was very lucky the last job that I had to have a boss that was understanding. I was also like very much on the road to recovery at this point, so you know, I would go to him and say, look, I need to take an hour to go and see my psychiatrist or something like that, and he was like, okay, if this can help you, then that's fine. And he didn't ask any questions, and he didn't judge, and like I said, I was quite lucky. He also employed people who had mental health issues and who were neurodivergent, so he had like a better tolerance to issues like this. So I'm very grateful for that. And it's weird because like it should be normal. Like it should be normal to just understand some people have mental health issues, some people are neurodivergent, some people have cognitive issues, or I don't know, neurological issues. Like when it comes to like physical illness or physical disability, there is such a better understanding. It should be normal to just understand this about people. If you can understand that somebody has a physical issue, you can understand that someone has a mental issue. It's not that complicated, but yeah, but it's still stigmatized, and it's still something that we are shamed for. Like, we are taught to feel ashamed of our illnesses, as if shaming somebody is going to help. It's not. So telling somebody to just suck it up, or oh, well, other people can cope with this, why can't you? It teaches us that we're not good enough. That, oh, well, other people are better than us, and we're not strong enough, and we just need to suck it up, even if it's really hard. Feeling guilt only makes things worse, and it also teaches us that if something goes wrong in our lives, then it's because of us, it's because of our mental illness, it's because we're broken. And this comes across in the book as well. Tal blames himself for all the problems he has with the people he loves. Like, whenever a relationship goes wrong, he's like, oh, it's my fault, I did something wrong. He became increasingly obsessed with how he might have failed in his role as a partner and a friend, feeling shameful and considering himself a disappointment to the ones he loved. He couldn't take it any longer, as if he was the centre of an undertow that devoured everything. He was haunted by endless guilt, despite the discrepancies between his never ill-spirited intentions and the sometimes questionable, sometimes catastrophic outcomes of his actions. So this is somebody who doesn't set off to hurt anyone, who doesn't set off to do anything wrong, but who ends up doing this anyway, be it a consequence of his own actions, be it just the consequence of life, of other people. And this is what ends up sending him on this downward spiral that eventually leads to his own demise. And he starts going over everything and trying to figure out how he could have done things differently, and going over the past again and again and trying to make sense of things that it's not possible to make sense of. This is very much one of the symptoms of PTSD, just going over the past over and over again, conversations and things, when what you really want to be doing is moving forward. But it's so difficult to accept, it's so hard to just come to terms with, that the brain just keeps going back and keeps going back and keeps going back and trying to make sense of it. Terrible thing about this is, because all of these negative events and relationships and stuff just tends to pile up and pile up and pile up over the course of a lifetime, there does come a moment where it's like, what is the point of carrying on? Because everything we're gonna do is gonna have a negative outcome, so there's no point in trying. Every relationship we're going to have is going to just go bad because we're going to do something or say something that we shouldn't, that we didn't mean or that we couldn't control, and it's going to go bad because of that. So what's the point of having friends? What's the point of having relationships? What's the point of even being alive anymore? When he does get to the very end of the spiral, which is when the real suicidal depression kicks in, he starts hearing voices. I also like in the book that he says, oh my god, on top of everything else, I also have schizophrenia. Schizophrenia is not the... and this is, again, so irritating that, like, people just so naturally associate hearing voices with schizophrenia. There are a number of mental illnesses that can cause a person to hear voices. Schizophrenia is only one of them, and not everyone with schizophrenia hears voices. But suicidal depression is... and it is one, and it is terrifying to have voices, and I can 100% vouch for this. I just remember being at work, and so I'm a car body worker, so I work with a lot of sharp things, and being surrounded by screwdrivers and saws and circular cutting discs, and my brain literally bashing against the inside of my skull, telling me to either stab myself or cut off my fingers or do something. I was lucky at the time to have co-workers who, like, their partners worked with people who actually did act out on these urges, so they understood when I kind of talked about it, or when I was like, I need a moment, they were like, yeah, okay. It is absolutely terrifying, and I really appreciate how it's written in this book. Somebody who is suicidal, this is what they're hearing constantly, and this is what their own brain is telling them. You're a piece of shit, you don't deserve to live, you don't deserve the air that you breathe, you're a waste of space, the world would be better off without you. So it's not just, oh, you're a bit sad, you don't want to live anymore. It's literally your brain is telling you this stuff. When we finally get to the end, when he does take his own life, the way it's written, I mean, along with, like, the whole book and the whole account of everything that he's been through, of all the issues that he's had, of all the horrible things that he has fought so long to keep under control, to cope with, to try and find positive things out of. When we get to the end, it's really sad, obviously, like, this person has died, but it's also understandable. And I did really appreciate that getting to the end and having that scene of when he's found, it's like, this is a horrible outcome, but also it's understandable that he didn't want to go on anymore. I don't know if I'm making sense here, but yeah, that was a very powerful moment in the book. So I want to talk about the black metal scene for a second, and it was kind of fun. Like, for somebody who knows about the black metal scene, there were a few digs at, like, you know, bands like Mayhem and stuff like that I thought were kind of funny. So there was some kind of inside jokes going on that I found that very pleasing. The way the scene is described, so I was never part of any local black metal scene where I grew up because there wasn't one. The only other two black metalheads I knew were these two guys when I was at high school. One of them is now a psychiatrist. make of that information what you will. But according to my boyfriend, this is pretty accurate. Now I want to talk about what I didn't like about this book. The first thing is that we never actually really get anything from Tal's point of view. Like, we get a couple of lyrics, but that's it. And it's the whole book is told by somebody else who cobbled Tal's stories together based on what Tal had told him, based on what he'd told other people. But we never really get anything from him in person, which I thought was a bit of a shame. I think it would have been nice to get at least the suicide note at the end, because I kind of expected that that's how the book would end, that we'd have this whole account by somebody else, and then at the end, like the very end of the book would have been his suicide note, the very last thing that he wrote. But we don't get that. We get like a glimpse of what it says in the suicide note, that he tells everyone like not to grieve for too long, and we just get a couple of lines, but that's it. Tal was a writer, so it would seem logical that he would have, like, something that he'd have written would have been included, but it's not, so I thought that was a shame. Like, all we get is this at the beginning when he says, "And now, after all these empty days and sleepless nights, I still drowning in the void, there's a hole filled with gunpowder in my chest. That, in shape, looks just like you. What a loss to spend too much time with somebody, only to find out she's a stranger. In the end, it seems we both lost something. You lost me, while I lost trust and time. I'm sorry the void once more engulfed me, but somehow, I guess, I myself became the void. I'm leaving soon. Sorry I can't save me." The other thing that I didn't really like was how his ex-girlfriend Hannah is, like, talked about in this book, because, as I said, he really did kind of make her into his life raft, his saving grace, and then when she decided to split up from him, all of that fell apart. So she decides to just cut all ties with him. There's a scene where Tal goes to her house because he wants to talk to her, and she won't open the door, and then she ends up standing on the entrance of her house, just screaming bloody murder at him. And the thing is, he doesn't actually know or entirely understand why she split up with him. This is one of the things that he's trying to make sense of and just can't. But whatever it was clearly very important to Hannah, because she doesn't want to see him. She is like, I am not dealing with you. Like, to have such a violent reaction, something bad happened. So he doesn't know what it is, but that doesn't mean that nothing bad actually happened. Enough to make Hannah split up with him, or maybe she's going through her own things. We never really know, which I think is odd, because the narrator at one point says that her friends and Tal's friends are all the same people, like they have the same friend group, and so them being separated is going to be an issue when it comes to, like, socializing. So I just find it odd that he doesn't know why she split up with him, because they have all the same friends. Like, surely somebody knows. Like, surely she told somebody or explained it to somebody, because, you know, girls confide, we confide in our friends. So I think it's odd that that doesn't kind of come up. And he says that, you know, had she known that he was going to end his own life, maybe she wouldn't have behaved that way with him. That's not on her. Like, his mental health issues, him eventually coming to take his own life, that's not her fault. This is a result of Tal putting all of his fruit in one basket, of just relying on her to be his life raft. And as I said, relationships can end, and then when that all fell apart, the boat sank and he was just left drowning. That's not Hannah's fault, so I think it's a bit odd how she's portrayed in this book as, like, being some kind of villain, or that she did something terrible by ending their relationship. So, other than that, I think this book is brilliant. I would, honestly, despite the dark aspects of it, I think that this is a book that everybody should read, because it does such a good job of portraying mental health and what it's like. Like, I'm not bipolar, I don't know what it's like to be bipolar, but there are certain aspects of like mental illness, of just brain functions that we can all relate to. So, like I said, I related to this a lot. I thought that JJ's writing was extremely on point, and I also think he puts this across really well. So for somebody with mental health issues to have a book that I can relate to so strongly and feel like there's somebody else out there who understands and who's capable of putting this down in writing so brilliantly, that's extremely helpful. But also for those who like never had mental health issues and don't understand, this would help, because as I said, he writes it so beautifully. It's very simply put, very easy to understand. No matter who you are, whether you have had mental health issues or not, I think that everybody should read this book. And just to be able to put all of this in a 200-page novel, a first novel, is quite an achievement. So do go and check out Snowburial by Michael J.J. KÖGLER. There's also an awful lot of quotes in this book from classic literature, which is a change because, you know, I tend to focus a lot on sci-fi and fantasy, so I guess it's nice to kind of refocus. I wanted to try not to make this too long, but I've been filming for almost an hour now. Yeah, I'll try and do my best to cut this down. That was my review of Snowburial by Michael J.J. KÖGLER. Do go and check out the bands Harakiri for the Sky and Karg. Thank you for joining me. Don't hesitate to leave a comment, share this video, subscribe to my channel. I very much appreciate it. Thank you so much for watching and spending all this time with me. And I'll see you all in the next one. Bye-bye.